Hello. Hello. Oh, I did so many things to learn. I got to take the screen panel thing off after the intro. I'll figure it out eventually, Nicholas. I'll
That's
figure it
okay.
out.
You're miles ahead of me.
I'll figure it out. Eventually, it'll get there. Until then, everyone's just gonna have to suffer with my bad directing skills. How are you doing, Nicholas?
I'm honestly great. It's a great week down here. So I'm invigorated, I'm inspired. I'm doing a very small amount of writing again, which is a thing that I know we've talked about has been kind of lagging. It's
Mm,
like the missing ingredient of my career as a writer lately.
mm.
So I'm glad to have that going on, and I feel excited to hang out and talk rocks with you. How
Yay
about you?
rocks. Yay rocks. I don't know. And typical, Sagittarian form, I don't know. I've been a little under the emotional weather, I guess, this week. So I'm looking forward to a new week. And just trying to change the vibe and kind of move forward with things. But the weather has been, I mean, not to be like boring, but the weather's been incredibly nice here. Like usually this time of year it's sweltering hot already, and it has been nice and cool, and the garden's been really nice to hang out in. We've been doing a lot of landscaping and just trying to get caught up on stuff. Brugmansia is about to go nuts in the backyard, which is nice. So that's basically been it. I've been in this creative um, pressure cooker kind of place and trying to come up with exactly how I want to move forward with certain projects, because there's all kinds of projects that are always boiling, or simmering on the burner, so to speak. So that's kind of been my week, my last 2 weeks since last we were together talking about stones. But today we are going to be talking about some very weird stones, or particularly a very weird stone that is a real stone. Like I've seen it and I've touched it and I thought it was just ridiculous. So I put it back away. But it's really not the vibration, but the name of the stone was ridiculous. So we are going to be talking about a stone that is pronounced Cummingtonite.
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about Cummingtonite with Nicholas today. And I'm really excited about coming tonight with you, particularly on this show. How do we not have horrible, how do you not giggle? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those stones. So,
You know, I'm putting my kind of professorly cap on. If we know the origins of things, it sometimes kind of lets the air out of the joke.
like
So
some guy's last name, isn't it?
it's actually named after a place, which is
Oh,
named after
Cummington.
my last name. Yeah, Cummington, Massachusetts.
Mm.
So it was named in like 1824, I want to say, as a new variety of amphibole. Initially, with no analysis done on it, just that it was visually distinct from other amphiboles. And now we know what we need to know about it as far as being a manganese silicate hydroxide, which just rolls off the tongue, right?
Manganese silicate hydroxide.
Sorry, magnesium silicate hydroxide.
Magnesium
Yeah,
silicate
MG,
dioxide.
not MN. But yeah, good old Cummingtonite.
Cummingtonite. Yeah, I have so it's one of those things where so I've seen it. I saw it at Tucson many moons ago, and it was one of those vendors that had just weird random stuff, and none of it really made sense, like from a collector's standpoint, why you would have this stone and this stone that just kind of had a little bit of everything. And they had this box of Cummingtonite, and I walked up to it, I went, this, giggled, did the whole thing. But it also felt fragile to me. And that's one of the things that, like, I tend not to go towards stones that are fragile, just because I am a klutz. I will bump into a case. I will knock something over. It's horrible things have happened. Horrible things. I could go into horror stories. So I didn't procure it for myself. So I didn't get to play with it. I didn't get to do anything. So let's talk about the vibration, the metaphysical qualities, if you will, of Cummingtonite. Is it as randy and as exciting as it sounds like it should be?
No,
No.
not really. So, let's start with what it is. So, Cummingtonite belongs to a group of minerals that we call amphiboles. So, in the early 19th century, the term amphibole was coined from Greek amphibolos, meaning ambiguous, because they have such variable composition, but clearly seem to be related texturally and structurally speaking. So amphiboles are chain silicates, what we call enosilicates. So in their molecular structure, there's a lot of silica, and they kind of create a long chain of it. But unlike other chain silicates, amphiboles are kind of cool in that they have a double chain. So it's two strands of silica, almost like, two strands in our DNA if you unwound them and laid them flat. And the whole amphibole group, on account of this double chain structure, does two things really, really well. First and foremost, all chain silicates help to stimulate the movement of things. It's like, the wiring in our devices that connects the device to its energy source. So they link things, they allow things to flow smoothly, they can promote cooperation, they can help us think in a very linear way to get things done in an orderly kind of fashion. But amphiboles, on account of that double chain structure, kind of vaguely, at least poetically, reminding us of DNA, they've always felt very karmic or ancestral to me, in as much that they help us kind of unpack the stuff stored deep inside. Now, Cummingtonite being a magnesium silicate hydroxide, and a relatively pure one at that. So it's two valencies of magnesium, two different ionic states, and then lots of silica and a little hydroxide on the end. So that magnesium component is soothing. It is great for when our emotions might feel kind of inflamed, could be a good way to put it. It's protective and nurturing. It supports getting things unstuck, emotionally speaking. It can help us be a little bit more open-hearted. It facilitates emotional release by softening the burn that kind of comes with, we'll say, raw emotion rising to the surface. Lots of magnesium minerals also promote a sense of resilience. They help us become more flexible. And we see that quite literally in this mineral. It looks quite delicate because it's fibrous. It's, thin strands of little like flexible needles, just like you see on screen right here. And so this is what we consider an asbestiform mineral. In other words, it is a variety of stuff called asbestos. We're going to circle back around to why that's not as scary as people think it is, in mineral state at least. But that kind of fibrous nature of it has a certain amount of plasticity. So it can help us learn to bend without breaking, can learn the value of compromise, of understanding that it's okay when our plans don't always turn out the way we anticipate them to. So it's going to give us a little bit more grace to handle those curveballs in life. Now, usually amphibole minerals, most asbestiform minerals, generally speaking, are going to form in metamorphic environments. So they help us embrace change and transition with a little bit more ease. They can provide the stamina we need to see it through. And, as far as the asbestos part goes, asbestos is not a substance. So when people talk about asbestos is poisonous, asbestos is dangerous and all this stuff, they're often referring to manufactured asbestos. That is not the same thing as asbestiform mineral. So asbestiform means shaped like a bunch of fibers stuck together. And that is exactly what you see when you look at this. And many amphiboles can be classified as asbestiform minerals, as well as a handful of other mineral species. And it's important to note that they, for the most part, are not chemically toxic. Not that I ever encourage people to ingest or lick rocks, please don't. But it is not their chemical makeup that poses a hazard, but instead it is their structure. They are very lightweight, very, very tiny, almost like little miniature needles. And the reason asbestos is a problem in manufacturing is that when fibers of it come free and end up in our lungs, they essentially stick in there for possibly ever. And that irritates tissue, which can lead to carcinogenic processes, lead to the formation of cancer. So, handling this safely is not a problem. Inhaling fine particles, that's the problem. But I've got news for you. Inhaling fine particles of any rock is a really, really bad idea, not just asbestiform minerals. So this is something that you can safely have and display as long as you're not, causing little flakes and fibers to come off that you're going to inhale. It'll be fine sitting on a shelf or in a case or, in a drawer alongside your other minerals. But the amphibole group, whether we see them in their fibrous form or not, jade, for example, nephrite jade is made out of asbestiform varieties of actinolite and tremolite that are intergrown so compactly we can't actually separate them. We can't see them with the naked eye. But this whole group of amphiboles have a really kind of soothing property to them. So although it sounds kind of randy, it kind of does the opposite. It's very soothing.
I don't know how I feel about that. And the reason why I don't know how I feel about that is because it sounds like it should be rather randy. It sounds like it should be a little bit more exciting than it actually is. I'm just going to say that. I was expecting more, Nicholas. I was expecting fireworks, Le Petit Mort. I was expecting, something groundbreaking. But no, I'm kidding. So it's very soothing. It's very calming. It wouldn't be something that we would use when we were trying to woo someone.
I can't imagine that being its primary goal. But structurally, if we look at that chain silica that's in there, it does foster connection.
Mm.
So connection is synonymous in some ways with intimacy.
Yep.
So it might not be the kind of passionate, in the bedroom kind of intimacy, but I think it could be good for authentic connection that lays the groundwork for that. Also, most of the commercially available Cummingtonite that we see comes from the Mina de Morro in Conselheiro, Brazil, and it forms alongside rhodonite, which is a little bit more amorous of a stone, and it's frequently found with the bright, gemmy varieties of rhodonite.
Oh, nice.
Which are definitely a little bit more passionate. It's
They're
still,
sexy.
like we talked about last time rather, that all the great stuff about rhodonite. There is a kind of warmth about it, and a hearty kind of connection. So we could stretch a little bit, but no, it's not exactly a sexy rock.
Yeah, that's okay. So the chain silicates, that's something that several stones share, and that's a property that we see a lot in the mineral kingdom. Can we talk about some other stones where that's an outstanding property that they produce?
Absolutely. So like the whole amphibole group is like the most exemplary group. It's big, it's diverse. We've got things like arfvedsonite and anthophyllite and tremolite, actinolite. So these are all going to be examples of double chain silicates. The pyroxene group, those are single chain silicates. So like agerine, for example, is going to belong to the pyroxene group. Augite and titanaugite and other things are also pyroxenes. So, they're all going to have that kind of fundamental quality of connection within them.
Mm-hmm. Augenite. So say that again. Say that one more time for me.
Augite?
Augite. Okay. Augite. I was like, I haven't heard of augenite, but augite. Augite. Is that white? Am I remembering this correctly? Help me remember this stone because I'm not Googling it live.
Yeah, so most specimens of augite that we're going to find is like hand specimens or inside metamorphic rock, and they're going to be like drab colors, brownish, maybe blackish. Titan augite is going to be much darker. But 2 episodes ago, I think we talked about Priscelli bluestone. This metadolerite, this metamorphosed form of extrusive igneous rock, is rich in pyroxene minerals, particularly augite and titanaugite, and they contribute to the kind of greenish gray, blackish colors that you see inside it, depending on what kinds of trace stuff is around them.
That's what I was scratching at. I'm like, okay, because these are building blocks for other things that we see all the time, and they're easy to take it, kind of look over or overlook. Look over and overlook are 2 very different terms, but they're easy to just kind of pass by and not think about how there's these, a lot of the stones and minerals that we love are actually comprised of multiple stones and minerals that are smooshed together to create something, quite unique. So when we talk about Cummingtonite, is it something that we should do gently, or should we be working with the stone gently? Should it be something that because we don't want to put it in waters, like we know we don't want to make elixirs and stuff with it. It's a little too separatable, break apartable, disintegratable. So we don't want to do that, but we can work with it in other ways, right? So what's a fantastic way, or what's an easy way to work with Cummingtonite?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, if you've got access to good quality rhodonite from Brazil, you might find some little fibrous patches in it. Even some of like the dark red stuff that gets polished will have these kind of greenish, grayish, or brownish fibers in there. And once polished, we can see that they're relatively stable. So you may have some Cummingtonite already in your collection. And if so, that would be a really great way to work with it in tandem with rhodonite, which is already a powerhouse like we talked about 2 weeks ago. But if
Hmm.
you got a specimen of just the kind of fibrous bit or in a separate kind of matrix, it really depends. You can find some that are extremely friable, where
Hmm.
the fibers separate, and we want to work with those with a little bit more caution so we don't inhale any of those bits or get splinters,
Yeah.
because mechanical harm is still harm, even if it's not chemical in nature. But if you've got a piece that's relatively stable, you can certainly hold it, you can carry it, you could place it on an altar, add it to grids and layouts and maps. You could do a great journey with it. Imagine a rock that has been squished and squeezed so much that its constituents have been bent and pulled apart into these beautiful fibers. It's seen some stuff. So
Hmm.
I think it is really fun to kind of shrink my consciousness down and project it into stones and do these kind of journey works and see what happens in there. And sometimes I get a very literal experience of the structure of the stone. And oftentimes, though, I get a really kind of poetic impression of its story, its life history.
Hmm.
And I think that
Hmm.
could be a really fun way to work with a rock that you don't see in metaphysical literature. So all we have to go on really is, an analysis like this that we can do by comparing its chemical formula to other things and looking at its crystal structures. You can check out Crystal Basics to learn all about how to do that. The big version, which came out in 2020, has a big chapter on decoding your crystals. The little mini pocket guide that came out this year, which is on the screen now, has a miniaturized version of that, which you can still take a look at composition and formation process, as well as some other fun things. But apart from doing that, what we have is our own personal experience. And that personal experience is hopefully we say, what has driven every crystal book that's ever come into print. Because,
Hopefully.
right, I mean, we know better, but in theory, it's at least a contributing factor. And
Hmm.
that personal gnosis, that whether verifiable or not doesn't really matter. It shows you what the relationship looks like. And I would encourage people who don't know Cummingtonite very well and who want to get to know it better, or any rock for that matter, especially if they can't find it in a crystal book. If you're having a hard time finding Cummingtonite, then sit with it, spend some time with it, get to know it.
It's so hard. It's so hard not to really just go there, because I'm a 5-year-old inside. Okay, so yeah, so it's so how this all came about, where it was the stone of the day, was that you were going through some stones and you found the specimen and you're like, hey, you sent it to me, a picture of it, and it was the laughing stock of the day in the household, because I live with 3 other gay men, and so of course we have to laugh at that. But it's one of those, because it's one of those stones, again, I've seen it, I touched it, I was like, okay, it feels very, fragile. I actually had somebody come into the store trying to sell rutilated rhodonite, and it was the really Jimmy stuff, and I was like, this isn't rutile. Like, this is definitely not rutile. And so we had this whole very long conversation about what rutile was and what rutile isn't, and because it shows up and it can look like that a little bit and some of that. So I think that's really beautiful, though. Like, that's the thing with that particular stone combo. Like, I mean, like, Jimmy rhodonite is gorgeous to begin with. Like, there's something that is unreal about it. It's actually the stone that in my head, I have in the sci-fi books that I'm writing, my little novellas, the power source, like that's like my merlinite, my magical stone that does all this stuff. So it's a power source called rosidium, and it is based off of rhodonite. Like it's based off of the color of rhodonite. So in all the books we see this neon pink, like flashy stuff that's coming from, the stone that I work with. So it's something that's really pretty whenever we can find nature bringing together multiple different minerals to produce something. I wish I would have grabbed a picture of it because it's really pretty. But if you just look up Cummingtonite, a lot of the times online when you're buying it, it's easier to find pieces of rhodonite with it than it is just to find the specimen itself. It's one of those kind of stones. You're not really going to like probably walk into a metaphysical store and just see a bowl of Cummingtonite that you're going to get to pick through. That's probably not going to be the case. So when people are buying online, especially when we're talking about these fragile stones, I have a couple of things that I'm looking for. Like I always go through and make sure that the reviews talk about packaging, because packaging is such an important thing with crystals, period, but especially when it comes to these fragile stones. And I make sure that if it's something where there's lots of photos, things like that, and I can see if there's like a spot that looks a little soft, like a little softer than the others, then I'll message the seller and be like, hey, can you just make sure I put a little extra right there? Because I'm annoying like that when I buy stones. What are things that you look for or you're paying attention to when you're buying soft stones like that are easy to break apart, easy to drop, and then have something catastrophic happen?
I mean, truth be told, when I'm buying fine minerals, I'm usually buying from people whose whole business is fine minerals. So those are the kind of people I'm going to buy the delicate things from. And, usually, especially like cabinet size and smaller specimens come in boxes. Inside will be the floofy plastic, which is fairly non-reactive, and this will be probably bubbled a million times before it's in a larger box with packing peanuts. So that's I kind of just know the sellers I buy from. I'd say that I'm picky like that, but absolutely look at reviews. You can ask questions if you're not sure about toxicity and safe handling, because there are things that you can't just put in a box and mail. Because of what they have in them. So chances are you're not finding those from a crystal seller. But if those are the kinds of things you're looking for, then those require some good conversations with mineral vendors to know how that's going to get to you safely and how it's going to be marked adequately. So that way it doesn't
Yeah.
arouse the wrong kind of suspicion.
Well, there's that. Oh my goodness. Well, especially shipping into California, we've got a lot of very strict policies, whether it's plants or crystals. So even like getting things imported when we had the shop, and we have buyers and things and sellers all over the world, and so we'd talk to one of our vendors, have something shipped, and then we'd have to go through this whole process of, is it going to get stuck up at customs? And then California kind of has its own customs, and so then there's this whole other process that happens with it, and it's a whole thing. So but I digress. So going to the concept of like buying these soft stones, again, I picked up Cummingtonite, and I was like, this feels a little too soft to me, and I put it down. So I have this natural aversion to soft stones, and then when I do have soft stones, they're very special. Like I have crystallized sulfur and things like that are like, because crystallized sulfur is fucking gorgeous. It is. Do I have it anywhere here? It's up in a case. But I will show it off next episode, because it's one of the prettiest sci-fi looking things you'll ever see. It's like a very strange neon yellow greenish kind of color. It's really pretty. But that's and I have I'm gonna pronounce it wrong, because I always pronounce it wrong, because in my head this is the way I pronounce it, ethereite, which I know is what it's at. How do you pronounce it?
Erythros, from the Greek word for
There you
red.
go. See.
Yeah, erythros.
See the difference between a public education and a private education right there, everyone. No, seriously. So yeah, so I've got that, like, but those are like my soft babies. Like those are the ones that I'm like, no, we don't take them out of the cases. We leave them in their little cases. And so I'm really have this aversion to working with them in magic. And I, at one point, and this was my gnosis, but I was like, really working spells and things with stones that are fragile, I tend not to do, because they are fragile, right? However, that isn't necessarily a good practice, right? Like, so because there are incredible energies that can come off of these stones. So I have to develop these practices of being able to work with them in ways that are going to keep them from being damaged, are going to keep them from, again, accidents happening and things like that. So I definitely use a lot of sand. And if you read Crystal Magic for the Modern Witch, you'll hear my love of sand. But sand is actually quite useful and amazing for a lot of things. But in working with fragile stones, it's really great. So it helps keep things balanced. Get your little pillows. Do you work with little crystal pillows? Are you a crystal pillow person?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot, but I've got some like fancy things that sit on pillows, or big things that like to find a stand because it's so awkwardly shaped is not going to happen. So an oversized pillow does it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got too many of them, and because we had the shop, right? So I have like this giant bag full of these crystal pillows that are just waiting to go to good homes. I guess I should start going through that and giving them to crystals as people are buying them. But it's working with these fragile stones is a trick. I mean, you got to get used to it, right? And for me, again, working with sand, putting them on pillows, I even go as far as because if you're worried about sand particles getting into your stones, you can use beans and rice or a version of that. And so I've done that before. But it's really about giving them what they need, but it's in order to, not break apart. But it's hard to get like, okay, let's talk about something weird and trippy here. You're doing a grid. You've got this really soft stone like Cummingtonite. You put it in the center of your grid. All the other stones around it are, let's say, a Mohs 8 or above, right? They're nice, firm, hard stones. The energies there are going to be different, right? They're going to be very different, just from a very simple, basic kind of form. What is your favorite technique for integrating those harder energies with the softer energies?
So one of my most kind of formative teachings that I got was from the author formerly known as Naisha Ozian before she changed her name and retired. And Naisha had like this really rigid rule, and she didn't have a lot of them because she's very anti-dogma, but she made this distinction between grids and arrays. So grids were those that were based on the geometry of the things involved, and they all had to be of a like kind. So, for example, if you wanted a grid with fluorite in it, if you added quartz and amethyst and calcite, she didn't call it a grid anymore. Now it was just an array. But that got the wheels turning. Like not only can we look at things of like internal crystal geometry, we can also look at things like composition and hardness and other things. So I got a couple of different approaches. Sometimes we vary that on purpose. Sometimes we want things that are different because we need a broad spectrum result. We need to kind of touch things in more than one way to make it work. And in the Chinese medicine approach to working with crystals, what they call stone medicine, they discuss the difference between softer minerals for like a kind of like a different length prescription, if you will. Not that we prescribe so much, but those harder minerals are the ones that are going to be very good for the long-term conditions, and the softer ones for the acute stuff, because they're so porous, they kind of soak it up. So, they're cautious about whether they want to mix or not, depending on the nature of the circumstance. Maybe we have an acute set of circumstances in our life predicated upon something that is much more chronic. And so we need that mix. So I don't think so much about how do I get these things to play nicely based solely on hardness, but I will stop and think, does the recipe make sense, whether that's by the kind of metaphysical definition, the crystal structure, the ingredients, or by hardness. And sometimes it's nice to have things that are kind of stepping stones between them, like the work of Michael Ginger, now deceased, but he was a really prolific author in the German lithotherapy field and a geologist first and foremost. When he taught about making elixirs and gem waters, it was really important that you had like composition. So if you had two things that were not alike, you would have to find something that somehow links in between them. So if we want to think about the kind of hardness scale, we might have those kind of medium hardness in between things of extreme softness or extreme durability to kind of link or bridge them. And having that kind of way that we think of, filling in the gray area with a related crystal can be super useful for making things feel more cohesive when we make mixtures, whether that's in a grid or in any other application.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for me, I look for a mineral or an element inside of the stones that they all share, and then I try to just kind of go to that, and usually it's silica, and then it's, or some sort of silicate, silica, and usually it's there, and then we go kind of out, because it's kind of the like almost all minerals and gemstones share that, right? So you can almost always kind of go to that, look for something that they all share, and then work with that. You have a particularly like interesting connection to silica and silicates and things like that, to the point where, I mean, like you have names, like online names and stuff that are like, include that in the time. So why is that something? Just while I'm here, I'm going to poke you as your friend. Why do you have silica as part of your name on all of your handles and stuff online? What's that about?
Mostly I'm a rock nerd.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
that's what I
just that
figured.
simple. Yeah.
It's
Rock.
the shared common thing. Yeah. Um, I know when I was writing Crystal Magic for the Modern Witch, I like my first chapter was totally different when I wrote, like what I wrote and what ended up being in the book, very different. And I went on a very sci-fi kind of adventure with it. And I was like, I think you read the first draft of it.
Yeah,
And it
I
was
really
like,
liked
well, thank you. Yeah, well, because we're nerds. And so I was like, all right, everybody, listen. The quartz crystals that grow here on Earth are growing on other planets, and it's the same crystal. And here's how we know this. And so if you can connect to these stones here, you can connect to this universal quartz energy. And imagine what that means from like, yeah. So I went down this like whoop, like whole road that Llewellyn was like, this is fun, but this is not for this book. And I was like, you're right. Because how do you go from like universal quartz energy to let's cast spells? So it was, it was a whole thing. But it is that common denominator, and it's something that like I I very much love how we have this idea that our planet is unique, and it is, right? We exist on our planet. The life that exists on this planet cannot possibly exist somewhere else unless somebody came and dropped somebody off or something, right? So like the trees that we have on our planet will not exist on any other planet unless they are moved there, right? This is something that evolved, and it is in our mineral tables. We can see they're part of gemstones and crystals and everything now, right? So like we have some really beautiful things that make our planet very special, and some crystals that can only grow here because of the minerals and the biological material that was left over that they incorporated into their systems and things like that. But from a big broader standpoint, the same things that are going on here on our planet are going on in other places without question. And it's this like it's both humbling to me as a metaphysical person to realize that the universe is really huge and it's all interconnected, even at that point, right, where we have the same crystals, right? um and then it's inspiring to me as a metaphysician at the same time, because it also means that there's a lot of really deep mysteries that do connect all of us, right? And so this being one of those things that we see just from a very natural scientific kind of approach. Hey, these same crystals are growing up on all these different planets. But then the flip side of it is that, like, what does that genuinely mean for us as spiritual people? Like, what is that about? And go even further back, we've got this idea that we are our deepest ancestors really are minerals. And so like, I mean, we can trace life back to minerals. So like, what does that mean for us as spiritual people? What does that mean for us as metaphysical people? That's the stuff that I just trip out on a lot. And so I find, as a rock nerd, as a silica person myself, a lot of inspiration in the fact that these processes are universal, right? I just went on a tangent, I know, but
it was a fun
I had
one
to share.
though. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you're like, yes, this is stuff that this is what we talk about, guys. Like when it's just us, it's like this. and French horns and weird baritone instrument things. Like, yeah, we talk about this in instruments. So when we're talking about Cummingtonite, let's bring it back down to that stone that we are basing today's episode on. When we're talking about Cummingtonite, is it a stone that people should go get? Like, is it a stone that people should look for? And if so, what type of person would be somebody who's attracted to this type of stone, do you think?
So I'm gonna like zoom out from the specificity of Cummingtonite just a little bit, because truth be told, you're not going to find it in your average crystal shop. More and more Brazilian vendors are bringing it here because it is attached to things that are more exciting and valuable. Mineral collectors, particularly those with specializations in metamorphic processes, amphibole groups, or silicates broadly, might be interested in collecting it. But I would say, as far as like the healy-feely magical crowd, I mean, it's so less available. But when we look at the amphibole group as a whole, which is really big and really, really diverse, I think that these are really versatile minerals with those double chain silicates that they've got as their base, and then so many other viable ingredients, we'll say, that still kind of adhere to the family, that you could find another amphibole to work with and achieve some similar properties, like our Vedsonite, like actinolite or tremolite, or a whole bunch of other ites that are even harder to say. But I think that the kind of person who could benefit from amphiboles generally are people experiencing chronic systemic pressure in life. So hello, welcome to planet Earth. That's just about anyone. People who are looking for ways to deepen a kind of ancestral healing practice. You want to really unpack the baggage that you didn't just create yourself, but if it's part of your belief system that you carried in from a previous incarnation, or that you inherited through the lessons and lives of your family or community, those who lived on the land before you. If we're trying to affect change at a more global level, because this is ultimately what it corresponds to. When we start thinking about ancestral, we all come from common ancestors. So really, those problems are everybody's problems. So if we want to see the big systemic change, amphibole group minerals, including Cummingtonite and glaucophane and all these others, could be helpful for soothing the feelings of unrest that arise when we start to unpack that baggage, when we start to work towards dismantling systems of oppression, when we start looking at how internal bias affects our everyday life. These can be minerals that help us stay the course even when that work gets uncomfortable. So that could be anybody who's called to work with it, whether that's specifically Cummingtonite or one of the other amphiboles.
Yeah, again, I'm a 5-year-old. Every time somebody says coming tonight, I'm like, hee hee. Okay. All right. So it is. Let us move on with crystal prescriptions. I've got 10 for you today, and they are all over the place. We need a little like bumper that just where it's like, do you remember Lowered Expectations from Mad TV? Lowered Expectations. So I want it more like a bumper like that, but it's like crystal prescriptions. Yeah, that's what I want. Okay. So let's do it, shall we? Are you ready? Are you prepared? For those of you who don't know what's about to happen, we are about to go through 10 different questions or 10 different things in life, and Nicholas is going to prescribe a crystal for each of them, and I will add my 2 cents when appropriate. Okay, shall we? Here we go. Number 1. What crystal would you prescribe for somebody who wants to make their cosplay more believable?
This is a hard one. I might say larvakite.
Ooh.
Larvakite is very much
Ooh.
like a glamour magic kind of stone, so it might help you like wear the mantle that is that character's persona and not just their clothes.
Oh, I like that. I would go with Newmite because Newmite's good with
Oh,
illusionary stuff, and
yeah, that's a better one.
that's a good one. That's a fun one. Okay, number 2. To help you learn a new instrument.
So, weirdly enough, I have discovered that Preseli Bluestone has a really strong link to sound. It's acoustically active,
Hmm.
and also the bardic traditions, who were poet musicians. So that's one that, like, I just realized has been kind of pushing me in the musical direction all along. But some others that we haven't talked about much: jade,
Hmm.
celestite,
Hmm.
morganite. Those are three that
Mm.
I've often worked with, the arts generally, but especially music.
I love the Morganite suggestion. I've used that myself for very similar things. I would say peridot, and but hear me out, because often when you're learning a new instrument, it's very overwhelming. There's all these moving pieces. Your brain has to get used to music, like reading music and putting it to your fingers. And there's this whole new skill set that you have to learn. And Peridot is really great about helping us to A, approach things without being nervous or anxious about them, but B, looking for resolution. So finding, answers to the things, techniques, things like that. So Peridot is one. I actually was using Peridot back in my wee days, for this very thing. But the reason why was because it was one of the stones that I got when I was a kid. My parents went on a trip and then brought me this little bag of stones home, and I had a piece of peridot, and I kept it, and I would take it with me, and it became the stone that I worked with all throughout my music career, all throughout all that stuff, and it was just with me all the time. So I've got like a special peridot thing. I love peridot. Anyway, okay, number 3, to help pronounce words more clearly.
I'm probably gonna go with fluorite because it's such a stone of order, organization,
Hmm.
things. I will say maybe sodalite.
Oh
Sodalite
yeah.
is the stone of seeing patterns and
Hmm.
to understand how we say words, what they mean, where they come from. If we can go back to the pattern preceding it, that would be a really good one.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, yes, I would add our Arfvedsonite, to that as well, just because it helps with getting that authoritative energy kind of out there. Okay, number 4, to ward off queer phobia. We're getting ready for Pride Month, so to ward off queer phobia.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with opal. And actually,
You're
so
going out with the big guns.
yeah, so part of the reason for this is, it's beautiful, it's diverse. We've got all these different colors that can be in a given piece of opal, and also two different things can be opal and not look anything alike, to remind us that we are a patchwork quilt of a community, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
makes us valid, valuable, meaningful, and amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, there's this weird little book called The Language of Crystals, published in, I want to say, the late 70s, early 80s, by Roger Calverley. And in it, he suggests that opal is good for people who don't want to be queer. And I'm like, oh, hell no. We didn't just take that really kind of homophobic route, did we? I think,
Yeah.
product of our times. This was a channeled book. There's a lot to be said about that being a whole separate set of problems. But I think
Mm-hmm.
really, it's led me to think of opal as not removing queerness, but removing the belief that queerness is a problem.
Hmm. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. That's far better than what I was going to pick. So we're just going to move on. Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. Opal. Opal is like, there's some power in some opal. Like there's something very, it doesn't matter if it's like a little boulder opal or if you get some like really incredible Phoenix opal or something. Like there's power in an opal, and it's something that, even as it's, it's a softer stone, but it's, there's something incredible about opal. Like there's a fire, and it's like an electrical fire energy to opal that's very different than we get with a lot of other stones. There's something potent about opal. So if you get your hands on an opal, folks, there you go. Okay, number 5, to wake up on time.
Uh, I'm gonna say, I'm not gonna give my standard like order discipline kind of answer. I'm gonna go with mahogany obsidian.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Why?
it's grounding, it's warm and invigorating, it's inviting. I think it's a good morning person kind of stone, or want to be a morning person kind of stone, because it's all about like feeling good in your body. And
Mm,
lots of times when we're not morning people and we're forced to be, we don't feel good about anything in the universe, let alone what's happening with our body being conscious right now. So I'm gonna
mhm.
go mahogany obsidian.
Okay. All right. I like it. I went a very different route. I was gonna say moldavite, just because little spark. Because if you're like me, you just lay in bed and there's no need to get up until there's a need to get up. So a little bit of moldavite helps spark your little butt, fulgurite to help, a
Mm.
little kick you in the butt. All right, number 6 to get the best sugar daddy.
Leopard skin jasper.
Leopard skin jasper. I was not expecting this. Why leopard skin jasper?
So in gem therapy, gemstone energy medicine, we use it as a stone of attracting beneficial influences. So we can already see how that's going there, but it's a stone of charisma, of like the parts and pieces coming together only when you bring that kind of personal magnetism in. And I mean, let's be real. If you want that sugar daddy, you got to have that magnetic je ne sais quoi. And I think this is a stone that like reminds you that you had that inside the whole time.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. I was just going to be really basic witch about it and say you want like magnetic pyrite, or you want no, which isn't really magnetic, but it's a whole thing. But or you want like magnetite, something like that, because that's like the basic witch answer. So there's that. Just put something pretty on it. Put a little Coach logo on it. It'll be fine. Okay. Number 7, to be the best dungeon master.
This could mean 2 different things. So we're going to go tabletop.
Talking about Cummingtonite.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think like you really need the gift of the gab for this. You've got to have like the magic that gets the creativity, thinking in the moment, plus the planning ahead. And I'm gonna go aquamarine for this because like it is for me the ultimate stone of inspiration.
Okay. That's awesome. I was gonna go with emerald, because it's all regal and takes charge, and also it goes really well. Like you can't have a game of D&D and like if you put an emerald, it's just gonna look like it fits. Like it's part of the anyway.
For
So I was
sure.
gonna go with emerald on that one. To assist with burnout.
Oh gosh, I have a really long list of things that I cycle through in my daily life, but let's pick a stone we haven't talked about very much at all.
Let's do
So
it.
I am gonna recommend some really lowly, humble agate. Um, Agate has, especially when we find them banded, those bands imply a kind of rhythm to them. And when our own circadian rhythms, our own rhythm of pleasure versus work gets disrupted, we need stones that have this ability to kind of take us in and out with the flow of things. A lot of agates are going to be rich in grounding and earthy elements. A lot of them are just generally nice for when we feel like we gotta replenish the battery, so to speak. But I mean, agates are magic. There's a reason they were some of the holiest stones of the ancient world, and let's not underestimate them.
Yeah, I was gonna say morganite for this, and because that is probably my number one go-to, or and aquamarine. I mean, they both are complementary, I think, for this type of thing, because of discipline and organization and things like that. And usually, burnout for me as a writer comes from not being organized and trying to take on too much instead of just getting my ducks in a row. So again, I gave you a basic answer. All right, moving on. Number 9. When you're adopting a pet, which stone should you carry to help make sure that you find the best partnership?
Oh, well, I think like the internet's answer is going to be Dalmatian jasper, which is not really jasper but apelite, and that's a whole other
Whole
conversation.
other thing. Yeah.
Full of it's not even quartz. It's mostly feldspar with what we call oikocrysts, which is a really fun word I just learned last week. Yeah, oikocrysts are visible crystals that form secondarily to the formation of that rock. So it's not part of the original genesis. It's formed by other stuff that can happen. So like Priscelli bluestone, the little white spots are oikocrysts. Yeah, but Dalmatian jasper is often or likely to be things like microcline or other feldspars that have oikocrysts of adrene or even arfedsonite in them, so chain silicates usually. Some may actually have tourmaline. It's been suggested. I can't find an assay report or any kind of analysis that proves that. But I think what we see with the juxtaposition of the feldspar and the pyroxene or amphibole, the double chain silicates, is a really good way of integrating something that is foreign, like taking something into your life that wasn't
Mhm.
originally there and helping it become a seamless transition.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. I was gonna go with jade, because jade is like my luck stone in general. So like, when you want some luck, go with some jade. But it's also really good at bringing like soothing things and tempering things out. And so finding a good copacetic partner, and a new animal pet, I would go with jade. But that's awesome. I loved your answer. All right, last one. Uh, to get your boss to listen to you.
A really heavy rock.
A really heavy rock. Yeah, right?
Really sharp rock. Um, so I think in this case, assuming people have tried all like the basic things, let's do sunstone,
Mhm.
because your boss is likelier to notice you when you exhibit the qualities of leadership rather than just, speaking up out of term, because there are bosses who are just going to brush you off because it's their job to be the boss.
Mhm.
But it helps us kind of receive the respect that we deserve by demonstrating those kind of admirable qualities of leadership. And it's often lead by example. So sometimes words don't do the trick, but our actions do, and sunstone helps us translate those qualities into tangible action.
Mm. Mhm. I like that answer. That's a very good answer. Um, yeah, that's different from mine. Which there always are. I was gonna say rutilated quartz would be what I would do with this. Higher order of things, bringing attention, direct lines. One thing that's really good about rutile in general, no matter what variety you're dealing with, is because of the striations, because it has those straight lines. It's very good for helping you get from point A to point B, helping you get your point across, helping you to direct line of energy to one thing or another. So I would go with something like root-related quartz. It's also got this like regal vibe to it that I think is really neat, and helps demand attention and respect. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
honestly, I think it's an undervalued stone for communication. In
Mm.
gem therapy, we use it predominantly as a stone of communication, but in a kind of odd way.
Mhm.
One of the mechanisms that sensitive people sometimes observe when working with it is that it builds this kind of etheric bridge between communicator and audience, and it
Mhm.
helps the message land no matter what the medium is. So sometimes you can't find the right words to express the emotions, but we can make sure that that emotional information is still transmitted through the ethers to make it more meaningful and to make it reach the audience in a way that matters to them. So I think that's actually a really great answer.
Awesome. Yeah, well, because we like our crystals. We like our crystal things. Okay, I think that wow, we that fills up our time. That was good timing today. I didn't feel rushed with that last one. Usually I'm like, oh, I have to get through this really quickly. But no. So real quick, let's just remind everybody, if they want to hang out with you between now and the next episode, where would you send them?
You can find me online at the Luminous Pearl in most places: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok occasionally, on my website, theluminouspearl.com. And I've got a bunch of in person stuff coming up this summer, which is new and exciting compared to the last few years. So I'm going to be putting updates out there so you can find out where I'll be and when. And how about you? Where can our friends online find you, Devin?
Modernwitch.com. It's all there. Modernwitch.com. You can always find me. If you're like, hey, where's Devin at today? Go to modernwitch.com. He's there. And yeah, so that's where I'd say go find me on the Facebooks, go find me on the social medias. We will hang out and do fun things. And in the meantime, hang 10, have a good time, enjoy summer if you're in a place where summer has begun. And if you're in a place where winter has started, I'm so sorry. Stay warm. And what's a good stone for Southern Hemisphere people who are going to be cold?
Amber.
Amber, that was what I would say too. Yeah, get you some amber and some cocoa, and you're gonna make it through. It's gonna be okay. And the rest of us, if we're too hot, if we're it's gonna be very sweaty. What crystal would you say to them?
Oh, ice.
Ice. I like that. That's good. I would say celestite, but ice is good.
Yeah.
And ice will hydrate you, which is also fantastic. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for hanging out today. We will see you in just a couple of weeks for another episode of Getting Stoned with Devin and Nicholas.